Good evening and welcome to the Cure HHT webinar series. I am Nicole Schaefer, Director of Professional and Medical Programs for Cure HHT. Thank you for joining tonight's webinar, My HHT Tracker, Everything You Need to Know. Just a few reminders, tonight's webinar is being recorded and will be posted on our website. After the webinar, you will receive an email with a short survey. Your input is critical to the development of future webinars, so please complete this. To help reduce background noise, everyone's phone or microphones are muted. To ask questions throughout the webinar, go into the gray panel on your screen and type your question. I'll ask as many questions as time allows during the second half of this call. There is a section for handouts on your control panel. You can download these documents to your computer during the webinar, or they will be available on our website. And then we just ask that you ask general questions tonight related to the topic so that your answer benefits everyone else on the call. So before we begin, I'd like to introduce tonight's speaker. Peter Lauwers oversees the design, architecture, and UI/UX of the Arbor Moon creative team. Throughout his 25-year career, Peter has worked in printed advertising, design, marketing, branding, and IT database architecture and design. Peter has worked for a number of large and small advertising agencies and design firms before joining Arbor Moon, where he now combines his skills in advertising and marketing fields as well as internet and mobile app development. Peter has led design and development of many successful IT and mobile projects, two of which earned him industry recognition, highest yearly e-commerce revenue award from General Motors, and Project of the Year award from Little Caesars for their mobile app. I'm happy to now pass tonight's program over to Peter.
Thank you, Nicole. Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to the webinar for the My HHT Tracker iOS app. Before we get into the app, I want to talk just a few things, sort of about the app and the development, and most importantly, your role as users and how that helps us. So we were very honored that that Cure HHT came to us to produce this app for them, and we had a really terrific experience working hand in hand with the Cure HHT team, the Arbor Moon team. We learned a lot along the way, and we feel like we put together a really great app. I say we put together a great app because what our goal was to put an app together that was really going to be of benefit to all of you guys. And what we learned along the way is that, HHT patients have a pretty wide range of needs, really. The usage of this app isn't all going to be done the same way. So we tried to design an app that will be able to hopefully accomplish the goals that you're going to need as a patient for your particular condition, and that's a pretty broad range covered thing. To that end, one of the most important things that I want to cover up front, and I'll cover it again when we're done, is feedback on the app that you can give is really very, very important. The amount of development and where we're able to take the app really is very tied to your feedback. We want to, as we continue to improve the app, we want to make sure it's the app that benefits you guys the most, and we can't know that without feedback. So, especially, I can't emphasize enough that each individual person's feedback, your feedback will make a difference. So, we encourage you, we'll see where there's a spot in the app, and there's a place on the Cure HHT website as well where you can leave feedback, and of course on the Apple App Store as well. So, that being said, I think I'm ready to get into the app. So what we're going to do is we're going to start the app as though we've just downloaded it. So I have an app on my phone that I have not even opened yet. So we're going to open that, and the first thing you're going to see is that the app would like to send you notifications. And we'll see as we get into the app where those notifications are going to be used, but it's really in your best interest to allow us to do that. You know, the notifications that we're going to be giving you are reminders of things that, you know, you're going to want to be reminded of, and you're going to be able to control how all those work. If you don't know what HHT is, and some users won't, you know, we have a couple of screens that just sort of give a very brief overview so people can sort of get a rough idea of what the app is like before they actually have to go in and do any sort of setup and commit time. We're not going to do that here because I want to kind of get into the app, and so what I'm going to do is tap on the red I am new to the app button. We have our disclaimer that basically says this app, and this is important to know, this app is absolutely not intending to take the place of your physician and your medical team. This app is not intending to treat or diagnose. This app is intended to be an aid for you guys. So, so this covers that, and so we're going to acknowledge that we understand. And then we come to the first of 4 quick setup screens. So I'm going to quickly pop some information in here. It's asking me for my email address, and that is not unimportant. We're going to use that in a number of different ways, again, for your benefit. So, so we really do encourage you to do that. As a very specific note, we do not collect any of this information. This app does not talk to Cure HHT. All of this information is strictly on your device. So anything you put in here will be your private information, and you don't have to worry about the security of that being viewed or breached. It's all only on your device. So the last part of this section is nosebleed data entry method. And we're going to leave it on track every bleed for the moment, but we're going to see exactly what this means. And then I'm going to tap next. The second part of the setup is allowing you to put in the information about your medical team and anyone else that you'd like to add. So if you go, if you tap any of these specialties, you can see that you can put in your physician's name and their relevant information, phone and email, and any notes you'd like to add. There's also a plus in the upper right-hand corner, and if I tap the plus, I get a new other down here at the bottom, and I can actually add anybody that I want. So if I want to add somebody like a caregiver, like let's say I wanted to add my dad. This isn't really my dad, but I could add my dad if I wanted him to either be someone that I share information with. That would be, you know, this would be the way that you'll be able to do that easily in the app. So those are the different team members. I'm going to tap next again, and this this third screen is actually a really nice screen. I'm really glad that Cure HHT had us do this. What this is an interviewer, a questionnaire, and this allows you to just kind of run down and answer these questions. I'm just going to throw in some sample data, and then when we're done, we've got one more screen, and then we'll see how we're going to use this information. So now that I've answered all these questions, I'm going to tap next. The last section is just simply notifications. You know, if you're going to use this app to track how your nosebleeds are occurring and the severity of them, then this will be able to give you a reminder to be able to do that every day. So we have a section for medical test reminders, and we'll see how that works too, but this is where you'll set the notifications up for that. And our last notification is about backing up your data. So we are not allowed to include the data from this app in your iCloud backup. So when you back up your iOS device, the data from this app does not go with it. And that's an Apple requirement. We actually violate their terms of service if we send your patient data into the cloud to be backed up. So the app will remind you to do a periodic backup, and that's very easy to do in the app. So we'll also show you that. So when I tap done, what's going to happen is it's going to take me to my email program. And what you'll see is that the app has pre-filled in answers, or rather some really good comments that Cure HHT have written up for all of those questions in the interview. So as you answered those questions in different ways, Cure HHT has put together some really good information. You know, it may simply be, you know, let's say, for example, if you answered that you hadn't gotten a diagnosis for HHT yet, they give you some good information about how and why, and even some general where to go seek that diagnosis out. So it's just a very long email, and you'll notice at the top it's pre-addressed to myself. So that email I entered for myself is where this is going to go. So you're sending yourself, and you can add anybody else that you want, but you're sending yourself all of these answers in your email. And what's nice about that is that you'll get them in your email, you can save them like you would save any other email, and you'll always have reference to those answers. So in fact, I don't know if you heard the chime in the background, but it just reached my email. So now we're done with the setup, and now we're going to come into the main area of the app. So the main area is the dashboard, and that's divided into two sections. One is what looks to be a calendar, and the other one is test scheduling. So let's start with the calendar. So we've engineered this app so that if you'd like to keep a log or a journal of how and when and the severity of your bleeding, you can do that very easily in this app, and you can do it one of two ways. The first way is where you track per bleed. So, you know, I can simply, I'm going to tap on October 2nd. And at the top, you'll see it's October 2nd, and then you'll see a time, maybe at 10:45 in the morning. I had a bleed that was between 1 and 5 minutes. It was a quickly dripping bleed. I didn't seek medical care. These last two questions aren't really all that necessary unless you're participating in a study. And if you are, then you'll get information on it. Basically, it's a reiteration of the first two questions, and it's just the way the study sort of verifies the accuracy of that data. But for the most part, you just answer those first three questions, and then in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see it says save. So I'm going to tap save, and then we see here on 10/2, I had a bleed at 10:45. That's exactly like I indicated. If I had another bleed, let's say at 2:45, the same day, I can tap that plus. I can change the clock to 2:45, and then I can record my information about that one. It was a little bit longer of a bleed, but it wasn't quite as intense of a bleed. So I'm just going to say dripping. I'm going to say save again. So now you'll see there both of these bleeds for October 2nd are in here. So I'm going to tap in the upper left-hand corner where it says back, and we're going to return to the calendar. And now you're going to see that on October 2nd, that day is filled with red because as far as the data that you've recorded, that was your worst day so far. And you'll see the 2 with the little drip that shows that I had 2 bleeds that day. If I tap on the 2nd, I go right back to where I can see that information as I had entered it. If I'm back at the calendar, though, I can, let's say we go to the 4th. I'm going to enter a bleed on the 4th. Going to save that one, and that was our only one for that day. So you'll see that the 2nd stayed the same. It's still our worst day. The 4th, we can see that it's gotten some red, and it's sort of, in a relative sense, it was almost just a little bit less than half as bad overall as my bleeds were on the 2nd. So what's really nice about this calendar view is that you can take a look at the month, and you can, at a glance, you can really see, you know, where you really bled the most, where you had your good days, where you had your bad days, and of course be able to go in and look at those. But, you know, it's a really nice ability to see overall how you were doing. What I'd like to do is show you the other method of entry, though. You'll notice in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little gear with the profile. If I tap on that, I'm going to go back to what looks like the settings that we had when we first set the app up, and they're very similar. This first screen, in fact, is exactly the same. So you'll see at the bottom, it's the nosebleed data entry method, and I'm going to switch from track every bleed to track per interval. Now, if you don't want to take the effort to really record every bleed, it just isn't that critical to you, then you can switch to this method, and it becomes a lot sort of simpler, of course, because you don't have to try to remember every bleed. We're going to enter information over a range. So in the upper left-hand corner, I'm going to say save, and I'm going to come back to this calendar, and now I'm going to tap on the 8th. What we see is we see a different set of questions. They're very similar questions, but they're engineered around the way that physicians collect bleed data over a range now, which is called the ESS data entry or data recording method. So the questions are very similar, but because it's over a range, the first question is, instead of how long was your bleed, how often do you typically bleed, because we're entering over a number of days. So I can answer several times per week. Then the next question is, how long do they typically last? And then I can answer, they're typically, let's say, 6 to 15 minutes. And then the intensity for this scale only has one of two intensities, so I can choose between them. And then just like in the other method, in the upper right-hand corner, I can say save. But before I do that, I want you to notice that also at the top, I see the date range of 10/8/18 to 10/29. What the app does is, if you said that you wanted to record monthly, which is in our profile screen, then from the date you start, it will extend the date a month, or to the last, to today, if the date that you picked was less than a month from the current date. So it doesn't go in the future. But I can tap that, and I actually have control over what that range is. So I'm going to pick a new end date of the 16th. So now we see at the top it's from 10/8 to 10/16, and it's just as I had entered it. I'm going to tap save. And now what you'll see in the calendar is, you'll see that on the 8th and the 16th, we have sort of a starting and an ending of a line that tells me that I entered a range of data that started and went through those days. And if I tap on any one of those days, I'll be able to go in and see exactly what I had entered, which was, in this particular case, it was not typically gushing or pouring. It was 6 to 15 minutes, and I was having several per week. So I can see at a glance again in the calendar that on the 2nd and the 4th, I entered specific bleeds. From the 8th to the 16th, I entered a range. And you're welcome to switch back and forth by simply by going up to your profile and switching this data entry method. And you can go back and forth as often as you want. The only thing you can't do is you can't enter over a piece of data that's already there. So if I would want to enter a range of data and I started on the 1st, it would not erase over the 2nd or the 4th. I would have to enter something on the 1st, something on the 3rd, and then there's room between the 5th and the 7th, or after the 16th again. So you can't overlap data, because that, of course, doesn't make sense. So that's sort of the major portion of the dashboard. This is what we think is going to be certainly one of the features that users use in frequency, is the ability to sort of track how your bleeding is doing. It's really useful for a couple of things that we'll see in the app, but also it's useful for your physician. If your physician wants to see your progress, our goal was to give you the tool to be able to communicate with them exactly how you're doing. I'm going to switch over to the other part of the dashboard now, which is the test schedules. And this was another area that we thought was actually kind of so unique that we thought it kind of needed an introduction at the top, because initially people didn't exactly understand why it was here or what it meant. So this section is helping you stay on top of scheduling and going to some of the major tests that you might that your physician might ask you to go to, and in some frequency. So for example, let's say your physician would like you to get a yearly brain MRI. If you were to put in the date of your last one, I'm gonna say August 27th of this year. You're allowed to choose that I'm going to tap on the frequency button up in the brain MRI section, and I'm going to say yearly. And then again, in the upper right-hand corner is save. So you see where brain MRI is. I have last test, which was 8/27, and I need to get it yearly. And then the next one says unscheduled. And you know, some of these tests you can't schedule a year out. So the goal of this app in this area is to help remind you to call and schedule that test so that you are on time for that yearly test, because some of these tests you need time to be able to take. So so what's going to happen is when I get within 6 months of the year anniversary for that brain MRI, then two things are going to happen. One is this unscheduled is going to turn red. And the second thing is, depending on how you set your notifications, by default, I believe it's set to 6 months, you're going to get a reminder that says, hey, you need to go schedule a brain MRI. Now, if you have scheduled it already and you put your test date in here, you won't, of course, get the reminder to schedule it because you already have scheduled it. But if you haven't done that, if it sees that it's unscheduled so far, its goal is to remind you. And we think that's a really cool feature. Sometimes it's really hard to stay on top of tests that are only happening once every year or maybe once every 2 or 3 years. So you can do that for any of these areas. You'll notice there's a big red bell along the right-hand side. Tapping those bells turn off notifications for those particular tests. So if you really only want to get notifications for abdominal MRIs, you can still set when you had your previous ones and what your frequency is, but you'll only get notifications for the ones that you have the bell turned on for. So I can still put this data in, I can still log a frequency, but for the brain MRI, I won't get notified, and in this case, for the abdominal MRI, you'll see that you will. And in fact, unscheduled has turned red because we're within that 6-month window of when we need to schedule it. So that's, and in fact, you'll see the red dot where it says test schedules up there telling you to come look in this area. So we think this is really nice because, you know, it's going to help people stay on top of some of the major testing that they need to have done. All right. So now that we've started talking about testing, let's go see what we can do with some of the testing that you do have and what you can do in the app. That's really cool. So along the bottom are our 4 major navigation points. And when you come into the app, it's going to be on dashboard because that's the one you're going to use the most frequently if you're using this as a journal. But the next one is data and tests. So I'm going to tap on that now. And you'll see we already have a bunch of stuff in here. And that's because we just entered some of that data in the calendar about our bleeding. So that appears in here. But we can also enter information about the tests that we have done and the results that we get from them. So I'm going to tap on the blue button at the top that says enter new data / tests. And these are the 4 areas that you can do that with. So you can enter information about imaging and radiology. You can enter procedures or interventions. If you had labs done, you can enter lab data. Or if you had a transfusion or infusion, you can enter that as well. So I'm going to start by selecting imaging radiology, and then I'm going to tap the blue button that says enter data and tests. And what you're going to see is just a really simple set of checkboxes. You know, what were the radiology imaging studies that you had done? And you can tap on them. You'll also see there's an upload button, and that's also pretty cool. It allows you to, let's say if you wanted to scan your test, you had your test in front of you. I'm kind of in a dark room here, but I'm going to use my camera and see if I can. Again, we ask you at that point for permission to use your camera, and I'm going to take a picture of what would be my test, and then I'm going to tap save, and then you'll see that I've uploaded the information about my brain MRI. So that's really cool. So then now that I see that I've done that, I'm going to say save. And now you see on 10/29, I had a radiology exam. And I can tap on 10/29 and I can see exactly what I had checked. And you can actually tap on any of these days and see the specific information of what was happening on that day. So let's do another one. Let's enter something for 10/15. Let's do a procedure or intervention. Again, in this particular case, we just have nice simple check boxes. Say I had a coblation and a lung AVM. And I'm going to then tap in the upper right-hand corner again where it says save. And you'll see now that on 10/15, I've actually recorded two different kinds of data. I recorded in my journal my blood loss for the day, but I also had two procedures that day. And so you see that reflected accordingly right on the screen. So that happens for all of the days. You know, this becomes just a big running log. In fact, sometimes it can get sort of overwhelmingly big. So one of the things you can do is, if you notice next to the profile button in the upper right-hand corner on this screen, we also have a filter button. If I tap filter, I can basically turn off or on the types of data that I don't want to see. So, you know, if you're using this on a daily basis to track your nose bleeding, then you're going to accumulate a lot of that data, and it can be hard to find some of the other data. So I'm going to turn off nosebleed data. I'm going to tap the red apply filter button, and now you'll see that list now slims down to just all the other data that I had, and that makes it really nice and easy if you'd really like to, oh, when did I have that coblation procedure, you know, you can get rid of all of the extraneous data and find just that. And then of course you can always go back to filter, tap the clear filter button, and return the list to everything. So before we leave this area, there's one other thing I want to show you, and that is the share button. So next to the enter new test data button at the top is a button that says share. So you'll see that when I tap that, now I'm able to share the data that I've been entering into the app with the people that I've put in the app, in my team. So I can tap my physician. Oh, I didn't put an email address for her, so I can't actually email her, but of course I wouldn't see that if I had. And my dad, which I'm going to also get the same message for. And I'm also allowed to check CC myself. And you know, that when we build the email, which is how we have to transmit this information, you know, you'll get a copy of it yourself too. And then the next section is, what exactly would you like to share? So maybe my physician said, oh, I'd really just like to see your journal for your nosebleed data, so I can uncheck the other things. And then I can also at the bottom check, do I want to give, does she want all of it, or does she want maybe just the last 6 months of it? And then when I say export to mail, it takes that information and it makes a PDF of that information and it puts it in here. You can actually see the little preview of it. Now, because I didn't enter email addresses for my team members, we can't put them in there for you. So in this case, I'm going to have to put it in myself. But of course, if I had put those email addresses in, the email would be all ready to go, and I could just hit send. In this case, I'm going to hit cancel because I don't need to send it. And I'll go back to the app. And then in the upper left-hand corner, I'm going to back out of the share data. But that's really how the share panel works. And it's really pretty cool because it gives you the control of who do you want to send what kind of information to. And if you share information, for example, that had attached scans like I had done with the radiology, those go into the email as well. So those will go to your physician or whoever you're sending that email to. Okay, so let's move on here to the chart. Actually, you know, well, yeah, let's move on to the charting area. Because I started the app from scratch, I don't have a lot of data in here, so we're not going to see a lot of data to chart. And if I get some time, I may go back and throw a couple of things in. But the charting area is actually really cool. So I'm tapping on charts in the bottom of the screen of my navigation point. And what I see is an empty chart. And at the top, you're able to choose, how far do you want to see in the graph. But the next thing we do is select a test to chart. And in this case, these things that we're able to chart are primarily lab values and this ESS score. And this ESS score is based off of that blood entry where we're doing a range of time. I'm going to choose that because that's all I have in there that I put in as far as data. And you'll notice that a pink line is extending between 4.5 to 5.0 because that's the data that I entered. But what I want to show you that's really special here is, of course, you could choose anything, and you'll see as you put data in. So, for example, as you put lab data in, you'll see more of a graph that you're accustomed to with lines going up and down. But why do they go up and down? And that's really kind of what we're all interested in, right? Like when you have a procedure done, what's the impact in your life? And you'll notice at the bottom of this chart are some red dots. And if I tap on those dots, what I see is in roughly mid-October, I had a lung AVM and I had a coblation treatment. And so I would be able to see by looking at the chart, how did my lab values change? Of course, if I've been entering them. And that's what really is kind of exciting is that, a chart that goes up and down is fine, but why it's going up and down, why, when you have a procedure, how does that impact you? Did you feel better? Did your lab values get better? And roughly when that is, so that you can see as your chart's changing why it's changing. And so I'm going to tap on the other one really briefly, and you'll see that's where I had that that CT scan and the brain MRI. So this is kind of exciting. And of course, as you put more data in, it gets more exciting because you get to see more result from that. But we think this is a really nice way that you're going to be able to see what's happening and what the result was. And that's something that is really hard to be able to do unless you keep like a really detailed journal by hand. But even that kind of leaves it up to you to kind of figure out what was going on as you flip around. So that's really the charting area. It's as simple as that. And I think with the remaining time that I have before we open it up to questions, I'm going to hop into the last section, which is the FAQs and resources. So in this section, what we tried to do here is we tried to take some of the really core FAQ information from the Cure HHT website, which is filled with a lot of good information. If you haven't been to their website, I was astounded. I mean, that's where I learned, honestly, the vast majority of information that I learned about HHT. It's a really, really well done website, and it's very comprehensive. And so what we wanted to do is take some of that vast array of information and distill some of it down into commonly asked things. So, you can tap on, for example, lung AVMs, and then here is information. What are they? And really all the information kind of distilled down that you need to know about them. So it's a really nice, sort of almost Cliff Notes version of the most important information kind of at your fingertips right in the app. So, you always have it, right there, and you're not having to search for it. So all of these different FAQs, you'll see kind of all the big basics are covered. At the top of this list, though, I do want to point out is a link to registration for the app, and this will take you to the Cure HHT website. And we really want to know again who you are. So this is where I'm going to come back to sharing your information about yourself and about the app. This is really important information for the Cure HHT organization so that everybody can get helped, so they can be more effective basically in helping people. So, we strongly encourage you to come to that link and let us know who you are, as well as give feedback on the app. So I came back and I did want to show you this. When you come into the app once a day, it's really brief, the app just simply asks you, hey, what's your energy level today? How you feeling today? You tap on one of the faces, whichever one you want. You say save, and you'll notice in the upper left-hand corner that what I tapped on is the icon that's there. Now let's say I go through today and I actually, by the end of the day, felt really great and I want to change that. I can always tap on it and say, well, it really ended up being a better day. Once a day, the app is going to ask you that. And it's just a really nice way of just helping later be able to reflect on, how did I feel? It's not a specific, tracking of, how was I bleeding or what test did I have, just how did I feel? And energy is a big indicator overall as to how your body's doing. So let me finish up with the 4 links at the top. The first one is in the upper left-hand corner, the Cure HHT website link. So we did want to provide you a way to get to the website right from the start and to be able to drill down to anything on the website. If your question or what you're looking for isn't part of those FAQs, come here. The second one is just a little blip on about the app. A little bit about how it came to be, and again, your feedback will help move the app forward. The third one is, what is HHT? And I'm going to pop in here really quickly. These are the 2 screens that we would have seen in the beginning of the app had we gone through those 2 screens. So if someone downloads the app and just wants to know what is this HHT thing, they can come and they can read really quickly about it before they decide, oh, is this an app that's for me? And the last one is a link to the Cure HHT Facebook page. So those are the major sections of the app. I think the last thing that I want to show you really quickly, I think we have time for it, is I'm going to go into the profile. And when we first set up the app, we had 4 steps to setting up the app. The first one was the profile about you, the patient. The second one was about your team members. The third one was the interview. And once you do the interview and you get your results, we're kind of done with the interview. So we don't ever go back to the interview. The interview is about where you were when you walked into the app. And the goal is that, if you don't have a physician or physicians that are working with your HHT, the goal is that after that interview and you go through that email, that will be what spurs you to go seek treatment and help. And that once you get into that process, that you don't need the interview questions again, that the medical team that you're working with, has all of that information, and you're in good hands at that point. So that section isn't here, but you'll see the notifications is now went from the 4th to the 3rd. It's the same exact thing about, when you'd like your notifications. There's a 4th tab now, though, that's for backing up. And I just wanted to touch on this really quickly. Backing up the app is super easy to do. I'm going to, as you see, I've gone into this section. Really, there's just one thing to do here, which is tap this red button that says backup data now. And what that does is it takes you back to your email. As the common thread, you'll see the only way we ever share any data with anybody is through your email program, and we never automatically send it. So you're in control of any data that leaves this app. In this particular case, what you're doing is you're sending your backup to yourself. So you'll see it pre-addressed it to me, and you'll see that there's a simple attachment, and I'm going to say send, and now I've just sent a backup as of today to myself. So if you ever lose your device or you buy a new iPhone or for some reason you need to go back to an old backup of your data, it's sitting right in your email from the last time you made one. And that's why it's important when we send you that reminder to back up your data, just come in here and send yourself that backup. And that way if something happens, you'll be able to take a fresh copy of the app and bring all your history right back in. So I think that's pretty much it. Nicole, I'm going to, oh, look at that, right on the money. I'm going to turn Well, I'm going to bring you back in, and I think we're going to do some Q&A now.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you so much, Peter. That was super informative. And we do have some questions.
Okay.
The first one is wanting to know, how do I delete one of the, if they did two of the same thing on the same day, same time, you know, just accidentally entered something twice, how do they delete that?
So now you're going to get to my full disclosure part. You know, one of the things that it's kind of hard to see this because we feel like we delivered this fabulous app. We actually delivered a much more fabulous app than we all, you know, Cure HHT and Arbor Moon included, had wanted to. Well, we based on our budget, we hadn't scaled up so high. So one of the things that's coming in a release soon is the ability to delete those tests. So we're well aware that right now the omission of deleting those tests is fairly obvious to us, but that mechanism isn't in the app yet, but it's coming soon. Again, feedback from you guys about things that you find like this will be important, but it was just not something we could get into this version of the app. But again, it's pretty much at the top of our list.
Okay, great. So the next question is, how do you get back to test schedules? Somebody was having trouble finding their way back to that page.
Gotcha. So the test schedules is dashboard, which is sort of a two-part thing. So if you go back to dashboard, I've tapped dashboard in the lower left-hand corner, which is nosebleed data. Like if you leave the app and you come back into the app, you know, we find this to sort of be the logical starting point because this is the screen you'll probably interact with the most. But test schedules is just, you'll notice at the top you can toggle back and forth left and right between the nosebleed data and the test schedules.
Okay, great. How can I allow notifications after I've said don't allow?
Oh, you guys are going to make me show you my messy iPhone. Okay, so on an iOS device, once you don't allow notifications, we don't, as the app makers, have the ability to hound you about that again. So and we do believe this is good for really your sanity and your privacy. I don't know if you heard my phone ringing in the background. It's rung a couple of times from political surveyists trying that call us 5 times a day. So Apple doesn't let us hound you. So what you do is you have to go back to your settings. And in your settings, in notifications, this is where you can adjust the settings for all of the apps that are on your device. And I don't see my, so it's supposed to be in this list, and it probably, you know, it's possible that because I just downloaded it so that I could do it right from scratch, it's possible that I may need to reboot my device to see it in here, but it is in this list. And I'm going to pick a different one. So this is where you would be able to allow notifications at the top again. So this toggle, the app does appear. And my guess is that because I just downloaded it so we could have a fresh crack at it, my guess is that's why I don't see it in this list right off the get-go. This is also iOS 12, which is relatively new, so that may just be a facet that Apple needs to do a bug release for to put it in the list right away. But we definitely have seen it in the list, and we've played with it going back and forth. And this is where you do this for any iOS app.
Okay, and there was the question also not just about deleting tests, but deleting a second bleed entry. Is it possible to change that?
So that's what we're going to be. Again, we're adding kind of delete across the board. Oops, did not want to close it. So what you can do is you can modify. So if you've entered, and this is if you're entering on a per bleed basis, I can go in and I can adjust an entry. We will be adding, when we allow you to delete tests, we will allow you to swipe and be able to delete any of the entries that you make in this area as well. So sort of delete across the board is coming very soon.
Okay. Can you just touch briefly for people, let them know why the Apple platform was chosen initially? I know a lot of people have Androids and were wishing that it was available on Android at this time. Could you just talk to that a little bit?
Sure. So we made the decision to go with iOS from the start because initially, well, first and foremost, Apple has done much more than Google has in the healthcare field. And initially, we were thinking that we were going to be piggybacking on some of the health kit and care kit capabilities that are built into iOS. When we actually got into the project, we realized that because we aren't sharing any data, it really wasn't necessary to do, and in fact, we had a little more flexibility this way. But right now, it would have been a tough choice because we had to go with one platform over another, and really, statistically, there's no very clear favorite as an overall platform. So that was the reason we initially chose iOS. We thought that we were going to get the most mileage and be able to get the most help from the operating system. But of course, Android is on the radar, and that's I'm not in a position exactly to know when, but I know that that's another very big priority on our list.
Okay. Also, we have a question about, can a person create more than one user on an Apple device for the app?
So that's something that Apple doesn't really let you do. It's not that, so to build an app that lets you have multiple users is a fairly significant undertaking because iOS at its core doesn't let you have different users on the same device. So, you can't log out of one user, like I can't log out of my iPhone and let my daughter log in as her and she sees her things and she has the opportunity like you could on, say, a Mac or a PC to be able to have your own set of data in the app. So it's not, so when you want to do something like that, you have to design that into the app. And it is a fairly extensive undertaking. Now, again, this is, if we get a lot of feedback that says people really, really want that, then we can certainly do it. But that's something that we'll have to build ourselves into the app.
So what would be a way to kind of work around this possibly? Would it be to, if you have an iPhone and you have an iPad, that you
Exactly.
could put different people on different devices instead of within the app itself?
You pretty much need a device per person. In theory, you could back up one person's data, delete the app, reinstall a fresh copy, put some data, like bring a backup in from another person, use it a little bit, but that's really so cumbersome that I don't think that's realistic or practical. So at this point, the general strategy for mobile devices is that you would have as many as you need for every user, and we do know that that's not always possible. We've been building apps for a long time, and we know that not every family can afford to have a device for every one of their users. Again, this is where I think that, Cure HHT can work with us when we see how much feedback people give about, oh, we really need to be able to store multiple people because everyone in our family has this, and we don't have 6 devices, and we can't afford 6 devices, so it'd be great if we had one device where we could store this information for everybody. That would be really important feedback, and if we get enough of that feedback, then that motivates where we focus our effort.
Right. Okay. Well, that seems to be our questions for the evening. So in wrapping up, I just want to share that Cure HHT started raising funds to develop my HHT Tracker based on feedback from the HHT community. Basically, patients wanted a place to share their medical information with their doctors and to store that information because it is a multi-organ disease and it can get a little overwhelming with information, especially with the follow-up screenings and whatnot. And so we really want to thank Peter Lauwers and the entire team at Arbor Moon, along with Dr. Jeff Carroll at the University of Michigan and the committee that worked with us for the last 2 years to develop this app. And as you can see from tonight's webinar, the My HHT Tracker has a lot of capabilities, and there will be a learning curve. So we just say the more you use it, the easier it will become. But if you have any questions, you can email us at appsupport@curehht.org, and there is on our website a link directly to that email. And with that being said, we also know that this app will require future improvements. Peter's already mentioned a few that we're aware of. And in order to design a better product, we do need your feedback. We need to know what you think works, what you think is missing, what you prefer to have done differently. And we will be sending you an email with a short survey after this webinar, and that will give you an opportunity to share some of your feedback, or you can share your thoughts by email at the appsupport@curehht.org. So I just want to say that all of us at Cure HHT want to thank you for attending tonight's webinar. Our shared goal is to advance one common hope, to give those affected by HHT a chance at a normal life. And, this app is free, but it doesn't come without a cost. That basically we can only provide this information and work towards improved treatments and towards a cure if you donate to Cure HHT, because we have many other outstanding projects that we would like to give our attention. So this webinar series is just one of many ways we accomplish our mission, and we're grateful to the donors at Cure HHT for making this and all webinars possible. So again, I want to thank Peter Lauwers for volunteering his time to lead this webinar tonight, which will be recorded and posted on our website at www.curehht.org under the News and Resources tab. We truly appreciate your participation and hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.